take a look at Chapter 9. So James Madison became the fourth president in 1809. So he's president after George Washington, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. Madison was a quiet guy. He was intelligent. He had lots of political experience. So he was pretty well suited to be the president. But he's going to face quite a few challenges during his time as president. President Madison tries to remain neutral in the conflict between Great Britain and France. So remember, France was asking us to help fight against Great Britain, but we decided to stay out of the fight. But we were selling weapons and supplies to both sides. So Madison says, I have a new idea for trade. He says he wants to change the Embargo Act, and he's basically offering to exclusively trade with one country if they promise to stop attacking us. So he's telling Great Britain or France, whichever one of you makes the deal first, we will only trade with you. We will not trade with your enemy. So Napoleon Bonaparte, the leader of France, says, I will take that deal. So what that means for Napoleon is now we are still selling him supplies, but we are not selling supplies to his enemy. We didn't know at the time, but Napoleon is really just manipulating us. But he promises to no longer attack any of our ships, not, steal our supplies that we're selling. And it ends up being a pretty poor decision on our part. So a couple of changes happen in the upcoming years. There's a new group of people in Congress that are a little bit more aggressive. They're known as the War Hawks. And they were not about trying to solve this conflict peacefully. They thought if Great Britain was going to start stuff with us, we needed to defend ourselves and not be seen as weak. Henry Clay was a member of Congress from Kentucky. He was a good speaker. He eventually becomes Speaker of the House. So he's 34 years old. He's really good at persuading people to do what he wants. And he and his people are tired of the British attacking us, and they're tired of the Native Americans attacking us, which is kind of ironic because we took their land. But he sees this as an issue, and he wants to solve the conflict with the Native Americans and the conflict with the British. So they say that war will result if the Americans are denied the right to travel freely on the seas. Nobody owns the oceans, and they thought that we had the right to sell wherever we wanted to sell our goods. So what happens is the British continue stealing from us, capturing our ships. They end up capturing more than 1,000 of our boats, and the French people, even though they had made a deal with us, still captured 500 of our ships. So they promised no longer to attack us, but they continued to do it anyway. So for a long time, we've had beef with the British. We had a war to separate with them, the Revolutionary War. But the French were our allies. And this puts us in kind of a weird place because they helped us in that fight for independence, but now they're going against us. They're attacking us. Whether it's justified or not, it's hard to say. I mean, they did ask us for help, and we didn't help them. So unfortunately, Madison ends up trusting Napoleon, thinking that we're still allies with them, and that causes a lot of harm to the American businesses. They didn't know that Napoleon was basically using us as a pawn or a tool. So the first three presidents, Washington, Adams, and Jefferson, kept us out of war. They knew that America was a young country and was not ready to be involved in another, difficult war. Each of them was certain that a brand new war would destroy the country. But by the time Madison became president, it had been 20 years since the war happened, and a lot of people had kind of forgotten how terrible that war really was. The country's population had grown from 4 million to about 7 million, so the size of America's population has pretty much doubled. And the area of the United States had doubled in size. When we bought the Louisiana Territory, the area we owned was more than doubled. So New England is rapidly developing industries, which means like factories and stuff like that. The South is getting rich off of these cash crops and buying more and more slaves. And many of these American people do not remember the struggle that early Americans had. They thought that it was time to do something about the country starting stuff with us. And the War Hawks were basically hyping up this fight, telling people that we can't let Great Britain push us around. We need to do something about it. So what happens? Great Britain basically agrees to trade with us and stop attacking our ships. But Madison is unaware of that decision before he kind of gets pushed into a war. So we have a chance for peace, but since there's no text messaging and there's no internet, there's no cell phones, it takes a long time for a message to get from one place to another, and we have no idea that Great Britain is ready to actually stop this conflict. So Henry Clay leads the House of Representatives. He's the Speaker of the House, and he says, you know what, we should take our soldiers and we should go attack Canada, because the British people own Canada, and Canada's right next door to us. They think Canada would be easy to defeat and take over in just a couple of weeks. So they basically hyped this up so that President Madison would have no choice. They got everybody behind this and got everyone in America, or a good majority of the American people, ready for a fight. So the northern states were led by the Federalists. They did not want a war with Great Britain. They remembered the last war and how terrible it was. But some people still think we need to have a war because the British are stealing our stuff, hurting our merchants, and stealing our supplies. They also end up closing their ports to American goods. So they're basically saying, you know what, we're not going to buy anything from you anymore. So they're stealing our stuff, and they're no longer buying our products, which really hurts our economy. A Native American guy named Tecumseh, he's the chief of the Shawnees. He organizes a couple different Native American groups together and basically unites them to fight against us since we're taking all of their stuff. One of the things that worried people about this is we thought the British were going to give them weapons because they're basically both our enemies. And if the British and the Native Americans are both our enemies, then they could be allies themselves. So why we're not ready for this war, there's multiple reasons. We basically have no army. When we fought the Revolutionary War against the British, we didn't have a well-trained army. And those soldiers that were left from there, many of them were pretty old. And the ones who were younger had no experience actually fighting. So we basically have old soldiers who aren't ready to fight anymore and new soldiers who have never fought before. It's not a good place to be in if you're going to a war. America's Navy also was not ready. We only had 16 warships, while the British Army has hundreds or thousands. So at the same time, American foreign trade has basically come to a standstill. So we're getting ready for a war, and we're in a bad place because we have no money coming in because our trade has stopped and our soldiers are not ready for this fight. So that would be like if someone, one of your friends you know, is about to start a fight with someone who is going to beat them up. You would try to talk them out of it. But once people get this fighting in their head, sometimes it's almost impossible to stop the fight from happening. And that's kind of the place that we are in at this point in the lesson. Okay guys, so let's take a look at the worksheet for Chapter 9, Lesson 1 and 2.